So hey guys, today we're talking about Apollousa and asking the simple question of should Apollousa be banned? So first off, I'm gonna say I have an alt-art Apollousa, so I would feel pretty bad if Apollousa got banned for that reason alone. But that aside, Apollousa's effect is simultaneously pretty good and pretty bad at the same time. It's kind of like eh. So we're going to look at Apollousa standalone first. So we have the effect of the original attack of this card becomes 800 times the number of link materials used for its link summon. Once per chain, when your opponent activates a monster effect, quick effect, you can make this card lose exactly 800 attack, and if you do, negate the activation. So this effect means, first off, Apollousa will always have a minimum of at least 1,600 attack. And the reasoning behind this is because you need at least two monsters with different names here. So yeah, you'll have at least two activations on Apollousa. Or do you? So let's assume that we have, let's go with Taya, I guess. If I can figure out how to spell this card. Taya. Okay. Spelt it wrong somehow, but we still found it. All right. So we let's say we normal summon Taya, and maybe we link summon off, I guess, a guy first before going into Taya. So we have a target to banish for Taya, or maybe we just did like Sword Soul Emergence, add Taya, normal summon Taya. And let's say our opponent just passes on a 2-mat Apollousa. I will Taya battle over Apollousa, and now I will activate Taya effect to you know, banish a card, and then essentially more or less full combo. So in that case, what has Apollousa accomplished? Well, you ate up your opponent's battle phase, so you will kind of live a turn, but you also committed resources to making the Apollousa, and then your opponent is able to now play for essentially for free, most likely. So yeah, in this case, absolutely terrible, and there is a cost somewhat to put Apollousa on the board. You know, it is a link 4 still. So yeah, that doesn't do a whole lot for you here. And let's assume Apollousa has 3 materials, I guess. Then we could go Taya effect to banish and then run this over, and then we could activate Long One from hand, for example. So Apollousa, first issue with the card, I guess somewhat, is that, well, for the player playing Apollousa, this would be a problem, is that you can't activate all of the negates on Apollousa necessarily, unless you can, in which case you just can. And arguably that card design that allows for that is the mistake, and not as much Apollousa. So for example, we have like with yugioh, we have Nightmare Pain, and you just can't attack Apollousa under Nightmare Pain. And then there's also with like Memento, if you have Cranium Burst, you can't attack into Apollousa in that case either. And then with Snake Eye, there's Link Revo preventing you from destroying the Apollousa by battle unless you had 2 different monsters that could run over the Apollousa via battle. And also keeping in mind your opponent has a Promethean Princess, so you overall would have had to somehow special summon like twice through Apollousa. And then your opponent has Promethean Princess, so I guess you could still do a normal summon and then run over the Apollousa. But then in Snake Eye specifically, they make a bigger Apollousa using, I believe it's usually a 4 material Apo. It's like 3 or 4, but yeah, that's what you would need to do to just get rid of Apollousa. So now Apollousa is seeming maybe a little bit busted, situational, of course, but we're going to go with the context of specifically a Malice deck making Apollousa now. So is Apollousa that disgusting here? It's like, if you ask me. So let's go through the line. So we go with Dormouse to start, I guess. So it would be Normal summon Dormouse, Dormouse effect, banishing White Rabbit effect, and you will set either, I guess it'll be MTP07 or GWC06. I believe it's usually 06 from this point, so we can go 06 later. I guess we should go link off, I believe it would be the White Rabbit or Decoder, banish Dormouse, special summon um back the White Rabbit, and then on our field we should have link Decoder, White Rabbit, and then Dormouse, and then we can link off in this case it'll be Dormouse, White Rabbit, and Link Decoder for a copy of Red Ransom, which grabs us Mouse in Underground. And then before we go activate Mouse in Underground, we would link off Link Decoder plus the Red Ransom. So which summon is this? This is summon 1, 2. And then you summon these both back, 3, 4. Special summon Link Decoder as well. If you were to do this line exactly like this, then you would get cooked, I think. So is there a more efficient way to do this? I think you go Lizard Haggados first, actually. And then you banish, probably, I guess, the Dormouse. And then you would special summon Link Decoder and then make Red Ransom, I think. Let's count it that way then. So that would be summon 1, 2, 3. If we go ahead and use Dormouse, special summon Dormouse, then link off or Link Decoder, that is summon number 5, actually, isn't it? So if that's summon number 5, your board would consist of, like, Lizard Haggados, Dormouse, and Link Decoder, which hasn't triggered yet, so that's just fairly Nibiru-able. Is there a different way to do this more efficiently? As a 1 card? I don't think so, right? And then do you have any extension or plays after getting hit by Nib here? Well, you haven't activated GWC yet, but you've already banished, technically, Dormouse and White Rabbit. So banishing these guys does nothing. Yeah, that doesn't work. So were you supposed to just add, I guess, MTP07 here? So you can grab Marchair, and Marchair banish what? Yeah, that doesn't do anything. So unless I'm missing something, Nibiru seems to actually just kill the 1 card outright. If you have 2 cards, I think it gets a lot more efficient for playing around Nib. But, you know, even if you are allowed to make Apollousa, and then I were to activate Nibiru at this point, I still would keep my Nibiru, and you would only have 1 activation left on your Apollousa, and I still have Nibiru to activate on a later turn. That could be turn 2 or turn 3, potentially, depending on, like, the exact situation. Like, if you're playing Bestials, that could definitely come up where I can just nib again and wipe your board, and you just don't have any recovery plays, potentially. So I think that sounds like pretty solid. And Apollousa as well. If I want to play around this as well, I could just remove Apollousa. We could drop Imperm on Apollousa. We can Ghost Ogre the Apollousa. We can use a Bestial to contest Apo by bashing, like, either White Rabbit or the Sevworm, and then threatening to run over Apollousa, or actually just straight up running over Apollousa. We can trigger, like, Druisworm to knock off one of the negates on the Apollousa, so there's only 1 negate to play around, and we still would have, like, 5 cards in hand, in theory, after that. So it's genuinely not, like, that terrible, I guess, to deal with, this Apollousa specifically, because it's usually always made with 2 materials. So it's just a 1600 Apollousa. You usually use, like, Red Ransom and Link Decoder, so it's not, like, too much of a threat. It does, like, add up though, and because of the field spell, you can't just directly run over the Apollousa by battle. which is pretty irritating. But if we do have like a Called by the Grave, we could just Called by either the White Rabbit or potentially the White Binder, depending on the situation. And then the only interactions we have to deal with will be the Apollousa. So that isn't like the worst thing. Snake Eye, I think, or yugioh abuse Apollousa way harder. So you would have to essentially contest, more or less, an Apollousa with 4 negates that you will have to deal with somehow. The only out to specifically the yugioh Apollousa would be probably a Raigeki or an Infinite Impermanence or something on the Apollousa. Against like Snake Eye, your only option really is Infinite Impermanence in this case. It's because it's made with IP, the Apollousa that you make in Snake Eye, so you can't destroy it by card effects, and you can't really destroy it by battle either, making it pretty annoying to deal with. So that's kind of crummy, but that's only from a going first perspective. Now let's look at this in a going second perspective. So why would you ever make Apollousa going second? Unless I guess you can't find lethal. I guess that's why you would make Apollousa, but Apollousa still takes quite a few summons to make. So this is like terrible to go for under, I guess, like a Maxi or even maybe a Volcharmy Fuelos. That could really contest the Apollousa well because it gives you more cards. And you know, Apollousa can only, like, I guess, negate so many times. And the amount of negates that it would take you to then go into Apollousa, it might just genuinely not be worthwhile to do so. Depends on the exact deck, I suppose, but you know, it's fine still. Kinda. Hmm. There's also the fact that, well, one of the annoying things about Apollousa is that specifically Apollousa negates activations. So, one thing we could do, for example, that you would not be able to necessarily do without Apo is, let's assume I have no monsters that can really effectively out Crusadia Abramax. You actually do have the option, if you are running Apollousa, to negate Magnet Crusadia Abramax's damage step effect to boost attack with Apo, because this negates activation specifically and not just negate effects, so it negates stuff in the damage step. This is honestly probably the thing I dislike most about Apollousa right now. I kind of wish damage step stuff would affect Apollousa more. Aside from that, I'm not like too peeved about Apo. So yeah, there's that. And then if we have back row removal, I guess it does allow you to, not against Snake Eye, but against specifically like yugioh and Malice. If I had like a Duster, that would remove Nightmare Pain or the Field Spell, allowing me to run over Apo with like potentially a normal summon, but still kind of rough in the case of Snake Eye and yugioh because they make bigger Apo than Malice. And also they play just overall, I think, a little bit better into Nib. Being able to threaten an Apo early on in like certain Snake Eye combos, and then if you were to Nib, they haven't made Apo yet, right? So if you don't do it, they will make Apo. If you do it, then they can still make Apo later. So that doesn't really solve anything here with Nib. With yugioh in particular, you can just drop an early Phantom of yugioh, and then if you were to actually Nib, it doesn't even take off a negate from Apollousa. They just get an extra body they can link off with the yugioh cards. So, not great, yeah. If we were to Ghost Ogre Apollousa, though, it can't decrease its attack. Part of its negate effect is to decrease its attack, and if you're not able to decrease the attack here, you do not negate the card. I guess that's worth mentioning. So the main thing that's worth mentioning, I guess, about Apollousa is it's mostly like just an N-word piece. Strictly going first, that's when it's most useful, I think. Because going second, you're going to have to be uh facing off against interaction, and Apollousa is more of like I guess I would say more of a defensive card rather than offensive. So if I made like an Apollousa, it's not really going to help me deal with, let's say, a Crusadia Avramax or a Baron de Fleur, as much as like, let's say, maybe making a Baron to like run over some of my opponent's stuff by battle, destroy by card effect, Omni negate. I think there's just more mileage in that. Apollousa, I guess if you made it with 4 mats, it would be 3.2k, so you could run off, or you'd run one guy by battle, you'd run that down. But with the same materials, you could also just make like an Underworld Goddess, which can out one of your opponent's guys, and then Underworld Goddess isn't necessarily negatable. This is a permanent negate, by the way. We could use this against, let's say, um, Sword Soul. We could link off the Chi Shao, and then Baron cannot negate Underworld Goddess because the effect to negate does not target, and then Underworld Goddess will just negate Baron for the rest of the duel, more or less. And then you're pretty solid in this regard, I guess, right? Yeah. And depending on the context, I think Underworld Goddess, like, just in general, going second should be a lot better than Apollousa. So that's a thing, I guess. And speaking of which, Apollousa, also worth mentioning, would be negatable by Underworld Goddess and not be able to do anything about it. Not really sure if that comes up nowadays, but I thought it was at least worth mentioning. This requires 4+ effect monsters, so you would need to control 3 effect monsters and then link off one of your opponent's guys, at least. Eh. That's kind of weird, but sure. Like 3 or 4 guys for Underworld Goddess, and then you negate the guys forever. Not bad. So, yeah. I'd say Apollousa, and honestly just like Baron and Borreload Savage in general, I don't think they're really like super ban worthy. The only thing that's like really annoying is that sometimes you can make them in decks that feel like they shouldn't really be able to make them. So I think like one of the best examples of this would be like Snake Eye, but no one's really even playing Snake Eye Synchro in Master Duel. Like I can't remember them like really playing this like ever. Like maybe at the start initially some people played it, but after a while they just didn't even play it. Like you can still play it right now. Nothing's hit in regards to Snake Eye Synchro, right? But the fact that you can access a tuner with the Snake Eye stuff is kind of dumb, and then that allows you to sometimes go into like uh Warlord Savage and Baron de Fleur, which is just kind of kooky, I guess. Aside from that, like we're definitely not ever making Baron in like Yubel, for example. So it's just kind of funky. But in general, like Warlord Savage and Baron are for the most part not generic, because you do need like a tuner to make them, I guess, if that makes sense. And also with Warlord Savage, you need also not just a tuner, but you also need a non-tuner of the right level. Then you need a link monster in the graveyard. So decks that can make it are few and far between, and the ones that do usually make Warlord Savage have nothing else to make. So it's like, I don't know, what am I going to make in Dragon Link as Synchro 8 instead? Nothing, I guess. Hot nothing. So yeah, I mean, there's some decks that just need generic boss monsters, and that's kind of why they're here. They're just the little gaps in decks that need these gaps filled, I guess, if that makes sense. But I mean, the biggest two problems I have with Apollousa, it's just simply going to be when you cannot destroy Apollousa by battle. And then the other thing would be the negate activation instead of negate effect, which is somewhat annoying. But there are like moderate bypasses to this, aside from just Infirm. If we're going by like engine, if I were resolving like the danger cards, you can't really stop these guys from special summoning themselves. And yeah, if you were to Apollousa negate like Danger Bigfoot, I'll just Danger Bigfoot again, right? And this card by itself can kind of just beat Apo as long as it doesn't hit itself, which it very well could. But you know, there are some monsters like that, not that many, but there are a few monsters that Apollousa actually just has a bad matchup against. Like for example, like Kashtira, Fenrir, and Unicorn are pretty good against Apo. So here's an idea. I will go special summon Kashtira Fenrir, alright? And then I will go ahead and just run over Apollousa by battle. If that's not possible, then I'll try activating some cards, and if there's some chain blocking action going on, Apollousa can just get sniped by Fenrir randomly. So just for example, we have some potential trigger effects. Well, it's not necessarily going to happen in Kashtira, but you know, let's say I send a card, it gets sent because you maybe Baron negate it or something. That'll trigger, and I'll also be able to trigger Fenrir, so we can chain link block here. So in this case, maybe it's like banish Theosis. We'll go with that, sure. So you Baron negate Theosis, let's assume, and then we go chain link 1 Fenrir, chain link 2 Theosis, no opportunity to Apollousa, and then Apollousa would be gone, I guess. Speaking of which, I guess Apollousa is kind of weak to chain link blocks. I don't remember what decks can chain link block and kind of deal with Apollousa exactly. But yeah, there is that quality as well. So maybe let's say we're playing Snake Eye and we activate, I guess, like Divine Temple. Divine Temple put Poplar in the back row, and we somehow put another card in the back row alongside Poplar. It could be anything. It could be a Millennium. Don't really care. We make Snake Eyes Doom Dragon. Then we can go Chainlink 1, Doom Dragon, target Apollousa, and then Chainlink 2, Poplar. And you can't do anything with Apollousa in this case. And that would be fairly hard to just stop in general. So, you know, it could be very efficient in that way. Speaking of which, is there hard once per turn on special summoning this? No. You're telling me if I put enough cards in my back row, I can just special summon Snake Eyes Doom Dragon multiple times? Speaking of which, fun fact, just realized this just now, this technically kind of needs to send 2 face-up monster cards from your spell and trap zone to the graveyard, which you can't do with pendulums because they would go to the extra deck face-up instead, so you can't make Snake Eyes Doom Dragon if you have 2 pen scales. Truly just realizing things on the fly, I guess. Yu-Gi-Oh moment. Alright. If we have Snake Eye Slamber Dragon effect, if we wanted to use the graveyard effect, I guess we could also chain link block this with like Poplar as well. We have that idea. So it's not like uncounterable by any means, but if you're going second against this, you do somewhat feel like you have to draw that, but doesn't that apply to genuinely like any end board that you have to deal with? Because this is not like a combo piece. This is an end board piece. That means you have opportunities to hand trap to prevent Apollousa from coming out. You have just things you can do in general in board breakers. So Apollousa is like kind of more frail in that sense, if that makes sense, or kind of like useless or inaccessible. Like, how would I put this? Like, if we look at Arrival, like Arrival could be pretty strong, kinda, right? Let's assume you have no way to out the Arrival at 6k attack, but you know, you could stop all of the cards trying to make Arrival, And then, you can still technically kaiju the rival. Or even if you can't out the rival, it's just, it's not like necessarily 100% impossible for your deck to deal with. And even if it were, I mean, at worst, we can go for like deck out win con. Surely you went through a lot of guys to make the rival, I guess, right? Surely. And a rival's not even necessarily that good of an example, I guess, but it's an endboard piece. It's kind of like a boss monster. Should we banish, like, let's say, Shishao, because Shishao by itself is like 3 whole interactions, man. That's like, well, not 3, but like, it moves like 3 cards. Compared to like Malice, I guess, like the Malice Apo with 2 materials. Bro, this card, insane. This allows you to put up Baron, which is an Omni negate, and then we have Chi which is a monster negate, and then we have the effect to use Blackout with Chi so we can like destroy the Chi and then 2 of your monsters. So if we think about it to an extent, like when you make Chi this guy is like 4 whole interactions almost, right? We have like Baron, Chi and then like Blackout. That's more interactions than Malice. Do we ban Chi guys? And keep in mind, Chi is kind of generic as well, It just requires a non-tuner wire monster. So, if we ever are dropping a non-tuner wire monster, which we could, let's assume I'm playing a synchro deck and I can just drop a Vishuda onto my board, or like just make a Denglong or something. Wow, disgusting. Splashable, kind of generic asterisk. In fact, what? Screw Vishuda. We'll just do this with only extra deck shenanigans. We can go Reaper Docus to then target one of our non-tuners and turn it into a Worm so we can make Chi Chao. Or the other guy. The evil long one, We can make evil long one, which is like 2 interactions, which is like as many interactions as Malice making Apollousa. Disgusting. We should ban this card as well, right? Like, okay, maybe not, but you get the idea. You could just Imperm Moyi, and that could just do it. Like Imperm Dormouse, then Apollousa is not a problem at all. Assuming we're talking in the context of like 1 to 2 card combos, like kinda. This kind of works, I suppose. Situational a little bit, but yeah. So if we look at Baron as well, I think Baron has one quality that's really annoying. So the quality that's most annoying about Baron specifically, I think, is probably the once while face up on the field, destroy a card, or no, negate the activation and destroy that card. That effect. I think it was more fine before SP, but now that you have SP, you have the option of like SP, banish Baron plus itself, or Baron plus one of your opponent's monsters, and then it kind of resets itself. That's a little bit more annoying. Baron, I don't feel is that threatening because this is, for the most part, just one Omni negate and it won't get reset. So it's like, it feels much more like one interaction. It's like pretty good interaction, but I don't feel like that's as oppressive as like Warlord Savage, but Warlord Savage is much more difficult to just slap onto an inboard than Baron. Needing a Link monster first, so a lot of synchro decks can't just randomly drop it. Speaking of which, when was the last time you saw like a Baron or Warlord Savage? Like, it's fine, honestly. Apollousa though? I feel like the best time to talk about banning it is already past, and now it's just not as relevant as it was before. I mean, it's still like a relevant card, right? But just how disgusting Apollousa was, with notably Yubel and Snake Eye, it was 1,000 times more notable. But it's not like Apollousa has absolutely no answers, right? they're pretty good answers to Apollousa, like Dark Ruler No More is a pretty good answer, for example. Prevent Droplet, Raigeki, but not against Snake Eye specifically. You have options, just straight up. And then, just win the coin flip, and then you won't really see these guys like Baron. You can sometimes make going second because Baron actually has this destruction effect, which is nice. But aside from that, like Warlord Savage, will anyone really make Warlord Savage or Apollousa going second, considering the insane kind of material you would need? So the most effective way we could slap a Warlord Savage, I think for most decks would be we would have to make like a link one at some point, send that to the graveyard, and then we need to get a tuner and non-tuner of the right level for Warlord Savage, and then we make Warlord Savage, which requires at least 4 summons. So this would barely play around a Nibiru at this point. And that has just 1 Omni Negate tied to it, so it's kind of like mid. And this exact line would be if we started with Quick Launch. So that'd be like Quick Launch for Tracer, Link Off for Striker, Striker Effect, add back Tracer, Special Summon Tracer, Tracer Pop Field Spell, Summon the non-tuner that you would need, and then make Warlord Savage. Savage equips the Striker, and then yeah, you have 1 Omni Negate ready to go, and that'd be like turboing it. But aside from that, it would be like something you would make later on in a combo, and it wouldn't really insulate anything. So it's kind of like, it's not quite win more, but it's like considering when you're making it, it's being made at the same timing as kind of like a win more card, right? So, imagine if there was like a Fiend Lock or something, so you could never make like Apollousa in your deck as well, that they're just, well, that doesn't quite make sense. So imagine there was a lock in your deck that locks you into something, so you would have to make Apollousa in a really weird timing, so it's really not protecting anything. It's kind of just purely an endboard piece for next turn. There are cases like that, I guess. And it doesn't feel like as disgusting. And also, maybe you can still run over Apo by battle. Kind of just situational, I guess, right? One of the cards that can just really clear Apo is just Typhon, for example. So, let's see. Typhon. How does one spell? Like this. Okay. So if I were to just drop Typhon, then, well, this doesn't really work against Snake Eye or Yubel necessarily, but if I were to make Typhon, how much does Typhon do? So first off, Typhon, if Apollousa is made with 4 materials, it has over 3,000 attack points, so it can't activate against Typhon. Well, or while Typhon is on the field. So we can go like Typhon, spin back Apo, and then run over something else. We can even run over the thing first and then Typhon effect if we want to sequence it like that. And then if it is made with 3 or less materials, Typhon can just straight up run this over and then bounce back a guy, just for example. So yeah, could go more into it, more in depth, but I think as of like right now, Apollousa is genuinely just fine. I don't know. If you have a reason for Apollousa to be banned, I want to hear it. I don't really see much of anything. I mean, I'd be satisfied with just an errata on this effect specifically. Not being able to work in damage step, that's my only like thing, I guess, for the most part. So yeah, that's all I got for you guys today, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye.